Hello, everyone. Megan here from Romance by the Book with the lovely Marielle.
Hello.
And this is our book chat for January's book of the month, which was my throwback pick, The Wedding Night by Katie Wilde. And I love it.
Yeah,
It's one of my all-time faves. I've reread it many times, and this was Marielle's first time reading it.
it
So
was, and I
that
had a
was
lot of fun with
fun.
it.
So yeah, it's kind of a unique story. First, we've got a lady billionaire, which you don't see every day, even in romance. And like the blue collar hero. Um And of course, she is neurodiverse, and the way that was depicted was really interesting too, I thought. And I was curious if you had any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, I it reminded me a little bit of one of Talia Hibbert's books.
Mm.
Um, shoot, and now I can't
Is it
remember.
Act Your
I think,
Age, Eve Brown?
yeah, I think it
Mhm.
was in that book that Eve Brown is kind of like, I don't really need like a
The label.
diagnosis
Yeah.
for it to be. And in this book, it's not quite that, but she does tell him like, I don't need you to like
Right. To Google it.
figure out what's wrong with me. My doctors and I have figured out what we're I know how to handle my stuff,
Right.
it's fine. Um, but I did really appreciate the way that it was depicted and how aware she was of, like, her limitations and how she just kind of set her life up
Hmm.
so that it worked for her,
Hmm.
and she
Yeah.
was super
I
successful at it, which was
yeah, for sure. And
fantastic.
I did like how other people were often involved in that too. Like her two assistants, she found that micromanaging her schedule was like making her feel crazy. And she was like, I can't do this. Like, you just make this, tell me where I need to go, and I will go there. Like that's
Yeah.
and that was how she worked that out, and that worked for her.
Well, and not that she couldn't do it or that it wasn't a thing she was good at, but it was like the amount of focus that she would
Hmm.
pour into making the schedule just right was like a waste of her time, which I thought was really interesting, but also like very, I think it's something that like I try to apply in my life too, where I'm like, these tasks I need to do, but which of these tasks are things that like I need to do?
Right.
Because there's some stuff that, like, maybe takes me a long time, but someone else could do it and it wouldn't,
Yeah.
I can't throw money at every problem, but there's some things that it's
Oh
worth,
yeah, for
like,
sure.
just, you know
Well, and every person's different as to like what is worth it to you to throw money at it instead of dealing with it yourself. And that answer is probably different for everybody, but everybody's got something where they're like, I don't care if I never do that again. Take my money. Like, I don't want to do it. So, yeah, I did think that was interesting. And of course, she had plenty of money to throw at whatever it was. So that worked out for her.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I really liked Audrey and how filled with emotion she was, especially when the whole world, like, thinks of her as, like, an ice princess, and how, that wasn't really accurate at all.
Yeah.
And
I liked
I'm glad we
that
got both
depiction too,
perspectives.
because I do think sometimes, neurodiversity just generally, as I learn more about it, it feels like the perceptions that people have and the stereotypes about people who have different, like if whether they're on the autism spectrum or it's a
Mhm.
different issue like
Right.
ADHD or something else. Like there's a lot of there are a lot of like shorthand things that people will say
Right.
that feel like a stereotype and that seem like they're not accurate to the actual experience that people are having.
Mhm.
So it was really like kind of cool to see
Yeah.
that on the page where like people on the outside are like, "Oh, she's so snobby. Oh, she just
Right.
is so cold." And meanwhile, that's like none of those things are accurate.
Right, and getting both perspectives, both points of view in the story was really important for that because you saw how things looked to Caleb. He is the stand-in for the world in this scenario,
Yeah,
and in her mind, you see the same thing and you're like, "Oh my god, like, that isn't what it was at
definitely.
all."
Yeah.
And I really liked how that was done.
I mean, I liked that Caleb also was somebody who paid attention
Mhm,
and made an effort, and even from the beginning, like, he was willing to kind of course correct and adjust when he was wrong about things.
mhm.
Um, which and, like, at one point in those first chapters, he's like, "Clearly, I have a chip on my shoulder."
Right.
And so he was, it's like he was self-aware enough
Yeah.
to be able to like deal with the fact that his first response to things that she did might not be right.
Right.
So I really like that too.
Um, there was a lot in this story. We people in inside and outside of romance always talk about like, oh, if they would just talk to each other, like things would all be solved, right? And there was a lot in this story about like the way we hold things back to protect ourselves, even when we've agreed outright to like honesty and transparency, and how that happens on the page and how it happens in real life, and the things that you hold back for self-protection and end up being the things that you should have probably talked the most about if you wanted, your real feelings to be out there. And I really thought that was um, well done in this story, and very relatable.
Yeah, it was well done because I don't think I ever, well, because of how I read it. No, I thought it was well done because I didn't ever really notice, like, feel. I never felt like they were not communicating because
Mhm,
the entire time they were trying to, like I said, kind of adjust and course correct and like check in with each other.
mhm,
Um, but there were times where they did hold things back, or they just it was almost like their response was so innate
mhm.
to like their self-protective instinct was so innate that they didn't even realize they were doing it until
Right,
after it had caused some kind of issue.
right. And also they, in certain instances, it would be the way they were feeling was like against what they had already agreed to, kind of thing. And so then they would keep that quiet too, to not like put pressure on the other person, which
Yeah.
all the other person wanted was for them to do that. So it was, and again, seeing both perspectives on that was really fun because you could see they both wanted it to be real so badly, and neither of them was willing to like go another step towards
Yeah,
admitting.
I mean, I guess a good example of that was how Caleb, from the beginning, like in the contract, he had put in like this relationship is going to be fake. Um
It will be dissolved
and
after all legal conflicts
yeah,
are solved, whatever. Yeah.
and in the contract it's written, from what we're told in the
Yeah.
contract, it's written like if you dissolve your
Right.
marriage
Uh-huh.
after this point, then you will not be in breach of this contract. So
Right.
like you're good to go after this point.
Mhm.
But because the first conversation they ever had, she asked like what his expectations were and like if he
Right.
how he wanted that, and he's like, "Oh no, it's totally fake. Like we don't even have to live like be talk to
Live
each other.
together
It's
at all.
fine."
Right. Yeah.
Um she assumed that that's what he wanted because that's what he said. And then that changed for him very quickly. But once it changed, he did not like, I think, I wonder if he thought that like it would be obvious,
Right.
and it was not clear to her because he never changed, like he never said anything
Right.
different. And I
He
do
had
think that
said one
that's,
thing and he never specifically said anything else.
yeah, and I think that that's very relatable to like real life and how misunderstandings happen within
Mhm.
like real relationships where people are making an effort
Mhm.
and actually trying to do things.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so like, and then so you have people who like are trying, but sometimes they've assumed that the other person knows something, and the other person is like, "What? What are
Yeah.
you talking about?" And then on the flip side, there were times when Caleb specifically, I think, was trying to accommodate
Mhm.
Audrey, and Audrey was like, "Yeah, but I don't need you to do all that. Like, I will tell you
Right.
if this is a problem for me because I
Yeah.
don't do things that are a problem for me."
Right.
And I thought that that was a really interesting. I mean, I think I mentioned it in one of our recaps. Like in
Mhm.
my own relationship, I see that happen where like we're trying to take care of each other, but it's like, no, but I don't need you to do that.
Mhm.
Um, so I thought that on both ends of the spectrum, that was pretty relatable.
Mhm. Definitely. And so Caleb, um, it's interesting because I always appreciate a good dirty talking hero, which but for me, it was so important for Caleb to be such because of Audrey and how she communicates things. And I feel like that was a time when he was like the most clear and the most honest, and she really
She
appreciated that. And
responded to that very,
yeah, and
like,
responded to it. Yeah. And I thought that was interesting because I don't think I remember another time where I felt that that was such a specifically good trait for a hero to have for his heroine specifically,
yeah.
and I thought that was really cool.
Like, not only is it hot, but it is perfect for her
Yeah,
because
exactly.
she understands exactly what he wants.
Yeah,
Um,
and she's able
Also,
to
it
respond in
was
kind
funny
by
how
saying exactly what's working for her and what she likes, and
yeah,
so yeah.
it was funny to me that there at the very beginning, there were a couple times where he was like, "Oh, I shouldn't," like, because she's so
Right.
reserved and so, like, put together
And, like,
on her
rich
facade.
and, like,
He was
too classy for that kind of a
yeah,
thing, like yeah.
and she's just like, "Oh."
Yeah. No, it was everything about him was definitely working for her, and, it just took him a little bit to figure that out.
Yeah,
Hmm. Um, but yeah, I really loved these characters. The Even though it wasn't a super long book, I feel like we got everything out of it that we needed,
yeah,
including the scenes with, the vindication for Caleb confronting, this family that has done horrible things to him and his mother, and how satisfying that was. And like, yeah, we got a lot out of, 200 plus pages.
yeah, I think Katie Wilde did a really good job too of, like, making that a reveal
Mm,
because, like, it's not like he's ever secretive about the
mm,
fact that these people have, like, wronged his
wronged him.
family or, like, bad
Yeah.
things happened to his mom because of them, like, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But you think like, ish, what's
Right.
going on. But when you hear the full extent of it, it's like, "Oh."
It's shocking. Yeah,
Y
for
y
sure. And as Audrey in that scenario, basically, you're like, "Oh, wow, like, he wasn't kidding about needing revenge." Like, that was like a way more than I ever
Actually,
could have
he is
thought.
being very reasonable in his burn
Right,
it all down.
exactly. So yeah, I really liked how she did that, and like you said, it never felt like a secret per se. It was just you didn't know it all until you did, and it was very satisfying when it all got laid out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In her case, she also has, like, a really strained relationship or non-relationship, I guess, with her parents,
Mhm,
but she is like, she does not want to talk about it,
mhm,
and it's interesting to me, like, how respectful Caleb was of that,
mhm,
but, like, even when there's a moment, I guess, halfway through, maybe 2/3 the way through the book, where she's trying to tell him some of the things, and it becomes clear that, like, "Oh, this is like, a terrible memory," and she's just
right.
like, "I don't usually like to talk about it," and he's like, "Do not."
Right,
Like,
you don't
"You
have to
can
say
stop
anymore,
right
I got
there."
it. Yeah.
Which was I thought that was really it was interesting because I think the at least for me, like, the fairy tale is, like, someone who will know everything about you and that you can be fully like, you can tell them anything. And in this case, yeah, like, that was true, but
Mhm.
also, like,
You don't
you
have to tell them
don't
everything.
have to, yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
it was
that was
fine.
really, uh for such a short book, and it's very insular, like, you're really always with the main characters, like, even though, side characters pop in and other conversations are had and other situations and stuff, like, you really are with them, and, uh and it just really all worked. I loved it so
It's
much.
interesting that, like, because they're not, like, snowed in or anything,
Right.
but it's the fact that they are that the timeline is so compressed that, like, they need to get this done. They need to get it done like right now.
Mhm.
That the marriage, I mean,
Mhm.
needs to
It's
happen
like
so
a couple
quickly.
weeks, right? Isn't that the like it's pretty much like
Yeah,
2 weeks or something, the whole story, I think.
yeah, and um, and that they needed it to like they needed to do it in a specific way so that it would have the right effect.
Mhm.
So all of that kind of put together made for like, oh well, we have to be seen together. We have to
Mhm.
go out and do stuff. We need to, and then she has kind of specific needs around public appearances and like
Right.
being so you end up in a situation where they really are having to like rely on each other a lot
Mhm.
and trust each other in a way that maybe they wouldn't have
Excuse me.
yeah that they wouldn't have done so quickly in like a different scenario.
Mhm.
And like marriage of convenience in a modern setting sometimes sometimes it's
Sorry.
hard to no I feel bad like it's sometimes hard to pull off but
Mm.
it like it was bonkers, but it made sense to me that,
Mm.
like, he offered it in a way where he was like, "I'm not expecting this to be a thing
Right.
that actually happens." But then once she agreed, he was like, "Well, I mean, it is true that if something happens to me, like, my whole,
Right.
like, revenge and spite is served a lot better if there's somebody who's gonna inherit this
Right.
if something happens to me."
Mhm.
So, yeah, it
And
wa like, it
I
really worked
liked
for me.
that, the things that he talked about with his friends when he was first considering doing this proposal were sort of accurate. Like, part of the reason why she liked his proposal is because it was new and different, something she had never heard before, and she thought it was fun. Like, it caught her attention, which was his whole purpose. Um, and of course, she was attracted to him, so that helped too, but
Never heard. Yeah. I mean, when it ca when it became when it was revealed, I guess, in the story that he which is kind of funny because, like, to us in the story, we knew from the beginning that he set up this proposal. It was he was serious about, like, wanting to meet with her and needing her
Mhm.
help, but, like, the whole, like, getting
Marriage,
married situation
right?
and, like, proposing marriage as part of the contract was not a thing that he ever seriously considered that she
Mhm.
would agree
Agreed
to.
to. Mhm.
He tells her that in the beginning, and also we are, like, in his head, so we know that
Right.
he was, like,
This will
expecting
never
her
happen.
to, like, laugh at that and then
Uh-huh.
be like, "Okay, seriously, these are the
What
ways
do you
I will
actually
help
need?
you." Yeah. So when she realizes that that's, like, really what he like, what he came in wanting, and then becomes really, like she kinda gets in her feelings about it because she's like,
Mhm.
"Oh, wait, does this mean that, we're supposed to be getting married tomorrow? And does this mean
Right.
that, like, that's not what
And
you
he doesn't really want
wanted?"
to?
Um, it gets resolved really quickly,
Yeah.
but it shows that, like, I I thought Katie Wilde was so smart to have that be a thing that, like,
Mhm.
kind of burst through like, cold facade, like, she showed him all her emotions
Yeah.
in a way that, like, not everybody could handle, and he had told her before, like, "It's fine, I can handle
Right.
whatever happens, I can handle it."
Right.
Um, but like, I mean, it was a lot, and
Mhm.
he did handle it, but we
Yep.
got to see it on the page, it wasn't just him saying, like, "Yeah,
Sure,
I'm
no
good."
problem. Yeah. Well, and I think too, it also was so smart because it was just a through line through the whole story about how important word choice was to her and how literal she took things. And so when he said to her, "I want to marry you," she took that literally, and that isn't really what he meant, at least not at first. And so finding that out was upsetting because she always feels like she knows what's going on and she didn't like that. And then on top of that, it hurt her feelings. Whereas and we find that later, um like when he says to her something like, do you expect this marriage to end, after this legal conflict? And she's like, yes, that's what I expect. But he didn't say, do you want it to? And like she answered the question he asked, but that wasn't the same answer she would have given if he had phrased it in a different way. And that was a constant through the whole story.
Yeah.
And I really liked that too.
Yeah. That was one that I flagged, like, right when he said, I was like, "Don't ask her that. You put it
Right.
in a contract. That's what she expects."
Yeah.
It's not, yeah.
Right. Like it's what she already agreed to. And she told you how important the contract part is to her. So yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to touch on. Again, it wasn't that long of a book, and I think between the recaps and this, we've covered most everything, but is there anything else specifically that you wanted to chat about?
Um, I guess I did wanna talk, we kinda talked about the dirty talk.
Mm,
Um, w Trying to think of what else. Probably, like, family dynamics in here and
mm,
how, um like, I mean, both of these people had real, like, tragic backstories.
mhm,
Audrey had, like, her family, like, her nuclear family,
mhm,
was, like, intact, right? Like, her parents were married, and
mhm.
she had this, like,
From the
they
outside,
seem
great life.
shiny, and they seem but they were terrible
Mhm.
and, like,
In
not
so many
people that she
ways.
could be around. Yeah. Um, and meanwhile, he had a family, well, his dad's side of the family were garbage,
Terrible.
but, he had a mom who was fabulous and would have gone to the ends of the earth to, like, take care of him,
Mhm,
and he felt loved, and he had, so it was like it was interesting to see kind of both sides of that,
mhm,
but also we got an epilogue where we see them as
mhm.
parents and them kind of, like, making their own way through
Mhm,
family, and I thought that was kind of nice to see, like, they each of them had, like, friends, and it was funny because through the book, even though it's a short book, like, we see them with friends that they have, like, currently, but also, in Caleb's case, he, like, reconnects with some people who
mhm,
were from when he was a kid
mhm.
and or,
And
like,
knew
high
his
school.
mom and yeah.
Yeah, and so we get to see how, like, these people who had, like, a family life that wasn't great kind of collected a
Mhm.
family of their own,
Yeah.
and people who loved them and who cared for them, and then when they had a family, they're able to, like, be better,
Mhm,
and it was really sweet, like, it was so sweet, and for a book that's so short, I
mhm.
thought that it gave us, like, kind of a full circle moment at the end with that epilogue of
Definitely.
them being able to be really, like, wholesome family people,
Mhm.
even though the examples they had in their lives weren't necessarily
Were
great.
horrible, and especially in her case, her mother was the worst, and also because of, um, her limitations or the way that she can and can't do things a certain way, she didn't know. Like, I think at one point she even says, he's like, "Your Our kids are gonna love you," and she's like, "Do you think they'll be able to?" Like, because her mom didn't love her, didn't understand how to love her or how to accept her love, and so the idea that her kids would be able to love her was like, she just didn't she wasn't so sure, and,
Yeah,
uh, and I thought it was really important that we get that moment to see
it
that.
made me a little bit think too about the Cat Sebastian book that we read, the Marion
Mm,
Hayes book,
mhm,
and how, like, the heroine in that book, the way that she expressed, like, her, affection for people was
mhm,
real different,
mhm.
and, she, like, made sure that her kid had people who would, like, snuggle up with her and, like, care about her and wanna hold her, even though
Right,
she wasn't a mom that, like, had that kind of, like,
right.
way of
She was
expressing her
not
feelings.
maternal, but she did
She wasn't
make sure her
maternal
kid
and
was
she
taken care of.
wasn't but she also just wasn't like with any of the people that she cared about. She
Mhm.
wasn't like somebody who was out there like snuggled up with anybody. Like
Right. Yeah.
so um and she found a hero who like understood the ways that she did express her love.
Right.
And so anyway, I just thought it was interesting to see that versus
Mhm.
this heroine was very different, but also made me think that, like she probably would express her I think the way she is with Caleb, like she doesn't like being touched by any like during the book we see her with people who are her friends. She's got like 5 friends, and we see her with at least
At least
2
2.
very good
Yeah.
friends, and she does not hug anybody.
Mhm.
She's not like it's the her demonstrations of her affection are not like what you would necessarily expect.
Right.
And so I think that that probably would have been a fear for her too, that like as a parent, like I mean, what if she doesn't want
Right.
to like be in a pillow for like
Right.
so like covered in children? Like it's
Yeah.
um maybe that's not the way she's gonna do it, but
Yeah.
that she has a partner who can help and is able to like it was great to see him show her like, look, you have a bunch of people who love you already,
Right.
so it's gonna be fine.
Yep. Yes. It was I always love like and of course in romance, obviously the two people are always like made for each other, but there's certain books where it's more like fated mates feel even when it's like contemporary romance, and this definitely felt that way to me. Like they were clearly like made for each other. They fill in the gaps that each other have in a very particular way, and it was very
Mhm.
satisfying, I thought.
It was. And the whole setup was real like when would this ever have happened any other
Right.
way? Like they couldn't have like met at the bar and
Right.
had
No, because
so
because it would have been the same thing with his chip on his shoulder. She would have looked at him some type of way and he would have thought she was judging him, and instead, actually, she was hot for him. So you're like, what does he know, right?
yeah.
So yeah, it would have been hard for them to meet any other way for sure. But yeah, so I don't know, guys. I just really hope you pick up this book and you love it as much as we did, because it was very fun and
Yeah,
very
I will.
emotional and very sexy. And
And don't worry, it's not a slow burn.
yeah,
As in the
don't be
beginning.
fooled.
Don't be fooled by Caleb thinking he's gonna take it slow. That is a lie.
Yes, definitely not. It is a very sexy book, and, yeah, I just love it, and I'm a big fan of several of her other books, so and a lot of them most of them, I think even, are, like, in Kindle Unlimited, so if that's your jam, go on a spree. Have
Go
at
look
it.
up Lady Wilde.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. We hope you'll come back next month, and read
We
what
don't know what we're
we don't
reading
even know
yet,
what we'll be reading yet. We will
but when we
find
rec
out.
we're gonna post this in the morning,
Mhm.
and then this afternoon,
Yes,
it
there will be an IG Live with a certain author who is picking our book for us for February, so we will see you then.
see you then.